Imagine for a second that you're the owner of a small business and you're doing pretty well. Then, one day, the owner of a much larger business comes into your store. They abuse your employees and force you to sell your store to them. Any profit that you make from that day forward will be sent to their bank account, but they assure you that you also have the full support of their financial and legal team. As time goes on, they start taking more and more of the profit and leave you with nothing. Now, you can't pay for your bills and you can barely afford to stay in the same location. You make the larger business aware of the problem, but they refuse to help you because you're not actually part of the company, you're just an income source for them. After a while, someone sets fire to your store and you lose almost everything. You call the large business owner and plead with them for help. They deny your request and accuse you of starting the fire yourself. Well, in a way, that small business owner is Puerto Rico. Let me explain. The United States of America will only invest in the island when it will directly benefit Washington, D.C. No politician will ever say this, but it's hard to argue with the history. The relationship has been anything but consensual since its beginning, and the start is often a good indicator of the path that the relationship will take. In 1898, the U.S. took ownership of the island. The word ownership is important because it puts everything into a much more honest perspective. The first question we have to ask is why the U.S. would want to take on the island of Puerto Rico in the first place. If you think about it like that, it becomes clear that Puerto Rico was an investment, and the reason people, companies, or countries invest is to get a financial return. In the beginning, the U.S. government poured money into the infrastructure of the island in order to make it more profitable and increase the money made from exports. This type of relationship is common throughout history, but we're less interested in admitting that colonies still exist in today's world. Throughout history, there have been attempts by the Puerto Rican people to either gain independence or become regular citizens of the United States. This has always been a tricky situation for politicians in the U.S. To grant independence would mean giving away any future return on the investment. At the same time, if the U.S. were to give full citizenship to the people of Puerto Rico, they might have the ability to interfere with deals that may benefit Washington but hurt the island. Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens, but they still don't have the right to choose our president. Now, that brings us to today. Hurricane Maria, from a humanitarian perspective, is devastating. But from an investment perspective, say the way Washington sees it, it forces the investor to mitigate the loss. From that viewpoint, it's no wonder that the president is not too excited about throwing money at the island. Instead, we're left with images and public relations statements meant to give the appearance of a helping hand. So why would help from the government pour into places like Houston for Hurricane Harvey and take weeks to even begin in Puerto Rico? Well, the government's response has been that Puerto Rico is an island and it is simply more difficult to get them the help that they need. While this is a valid concern, it would postpone the help by days, not weeks. Another explanation is that the people of Houston can vote. That means that if the government fails to help them when they are in a time of need, they will simply vote the leaders out of power. Puerto Ricans are not afforded that advantage because they have 0 votes in the national election. This leaves the politicians on the island alone and desperate for help. It has been estimated that it will take $40 to $80 billion to rebuild the island. Now, the point of this video is not to say that there aren't any good politicians that want to help Puerto Rico. The point of this is to think about the historical relevance of colonies and their colonizers. Colonizers are always slow to help and quick to take. And, unfortunately, that is the role that the USA, the colonizer, has taken so far with Puerto Rico. The status of this relationship is not likely to change. But while we debate the topic of assistance for the island, it's important to remember how we ended up here. We can't change our history, but what we can change is the way that the two governments interact from this day forward.